Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing Zootopia. This movie released in theaters in the US on March 4th, 2016. But I actually didn't see this movie in theaters. I first watched it a year later when it was available on Netflix. And I was debating bringing this up because it's sad, but I do want to share, so the reason I finally watched this movie was because it was right after our cat had died. It was sudden, unfortunately. I was absolutely devastated. She used to sleep in my bed with me every night, and I needed a distraction. And I figured, let me finally watch this movie because I had heard amazing things about it. I had been wanting to watch it. And I mean, I realized the irony of watching a movie about animals to distract myself from losing our pet, but it did help. And if you've ever lost a pet, whether recently or whenever, my heart goes out to you. I know how difficult it is. I don't mean to be all depressing bringing all of this up, but I just wanted to share that because it was just a nice way for me to cope and just take my mind off of things. And real quick regarding pets, we did adopt 2 new cats. We adopted them a couple years ago, and one of them's actually hanging out with me right now. And of course they don't replace our old pets, but our old pets are always in our hearts. I don't mean to be a downer saying all of this, make this all serious and sad, but I just wanted to share that. So watching this movie did help me at the time. And so that was actually my first and only time watching it. So this was my second time watching it. And this is such an amazing movie. I love everything about it. I mean, I love the world of Zootopia itself. I think it's so clever and creative. I love the characters, Nick and Judy. I think they're amazing. I love the voice acting. I think is amazing. The message itself of the movie, it's so powerful, so pertinent. The story, everything about it. I love this movie so much. The animation, it's beautiful. And this probably is one of my all-time favorite animated movies. And what's interesting about this movie is that it was originally going to be Nick's story, Nick Wilde, the fox. And in an early concept for this movie, predators would wear these what they call tame collars that are basically, they seem like shock collars, and they have to wear them because if they take them off, the other animals, I guess, are afraid that they would become feral and attack them. And so Nick decides to create this kind of safe haven for predators where they don't have to live in distress and being feared by other animals because it's the predators with the prey. And I guess it's supposed to be an amusement park type world. I'm not too keen on the details, to be honest, but that's my understanding of it. But then they later, in revisions, they changed it to make it Judy Hopps' story. Judy Hopps, a bunny, wanting to become a cop. And so this movie opens with a young Judy doing a school play. And she pretends to get attacked by a predator, and then she's saying, blood, 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 and death. So adorable. I love bunnies, too. Actually, I mentioned this when I discussed my favorite children's books, but I did have a pet rabbit, too. Her name was Snowflake. I called her Snowy for short. I loved her so much. I don't mean to be bringing up past pets, but I just wanted to say that I love bunnies. Anyway, so in the play, Judy says that she wants to make the world a better place by becoming a police officer. And then in the audience, there is this bully fox character named Gideon Gray, and he just kind of scoffs at that and says, that is the most stupidest thing I have ever heard. He's not too bright. But then after the play, Judy's hopping along, and her parents are talking to her saying that they gave up on their dreams and that they settled, and that if you don't try anything new, you'll never fail. And they're kind of trying to move her away from wanting to be a cop because they think she has very little chance of success at it, because they tell her flat out that there's never been a bunny cop ever. And she says, well, I guess I'll have to be the first one. So that's the thing about Judy. She is extremely optimistic, and she's wanting to defy the odds because that's her goal in life, to make the world a better place by becoming a cop. And so then in another scene, when she's still a little kid, she sees that Gideon Grey is now tormenting these other animals, and she goes up to him telling him to stop, and then he pushes her down and is intimidating her, but she doesn't stop, and then he walks away finally, and the other animals come up to her saying, "Oh wow, that was so brave," and she's saying, "Yeah, here you go," and she gives them the tickets that he had stolen, their fair tickets. And then at the end of all that, she says, "He was right about one thing, I don't know when to quit." And then it flash forwards 15 years later, and Judy is in the police academy, and she has to work extra hard, but she does it because this is her dream. And she graduates top of her class in the academy. And then when she's going to go off to Zootopia to be a cop, her parents are telling her to watch out for all these dangerous things. They're saying, "Oh, well, take this, the fox deterrent, a fox repellent, a fox taser." And she says, "Okay, I'll take this." She takes the fox repellent. And then it's so adorable when she runs off, and then she stops, and then she looks back, runs back to her parents, gives them both a hug and a kiss, and it's so sweet. And so then when she is off to Zootopia, the song with this movie, it is "Try Everything" by Shakira, and Shakira plays, so in the movie it's by Gazelle, she plays a gazelle. And that's such a great anthem for this film, and my favorite lyric in it is, "I want to try everything even though I could fail." That's it, because despite failure, you have to go after your dreams, even in spite of failure. If you fail, you get up, you try again. So what an important message for all of us. And that's just it's such a great scene, just watching it from Judy's eyes, taking the sights of Zootopia. Everything is so big and wonderful, all these endless possibilities for her. And she's going to live out her dream. She's going to be a cop. And so first, let me introduce a few other characters. We have Benjamin Clawhauser, a cheetah, and his first exchange with Judy is funny, where he says, "Oh, a bunny, how cute." And then Judy says, "Actually, a bunny can call another bunny cute, but when other animals do it..." So that's clever. And then when she's with the other police officers, she turns to one of them saying, "You ready to make the world a better place?" And she holds up her fists for a fist bump, and the rhino cop just reluctantly fist bumps her, and he just is so powerful, he just pushes her back when he does the fist bump. And then we meet Chief Bogo, and he says, "We have to address the elephant in the room. Francine, happy birthday." That's cute. And so then he assigns everyone their duties, and he explains how there are 14 missing mammal cases, but then he gives Judy parking duty. And she wants to prove herself, but that's what she has to do. And so she says, "Well, instead of 100 tickets, I'm going to write 200 tickets before noon." So she's always pushing herself to go above and beyond. And so as she's writing tickets, she even ends up writing herself a ticket, 201 tickets. And then we see, for the first time, Nick Wilde. And she gets the feeling that something suspicious is going on. So she follows him into this ice cream shop, and there are elephants serving ice cream with their trunks. So Nick is trying to buy a jumbo pop for his little boy, supposedly. And then but the elephant is refusing to serve to a fox. And then Judy intervenes, saying that it's a health code violation to be serving ice cream with an ungloved trunk. And she ends up buying Nick the jumbo pop for his little boy. But then it turns out that they're not father and son, they're actually partners in crime together, because Judy later follows them and she sees that they're doing all of this shady business. They're melting down the jumbo pop to make it into small popsicles, P-A-W, popsicles, and they are reselling them to these hamster businessmen, and then they're selling the popsicle sticks and saying, oh, it's redwood, because it's literally red from the popsicle. And so then at the end, the little, he's a fennec fox named Finnick, apparently. He spits out the binky that he's pretending, because he's pretending to be a little kid, and then he says, with a deep voice, which I saw that joke coming, I'll be honest, when I first watched this, that he's going to have a deep voice, and he just says, you kiss me tomorrow, I'll bite your face off. And then Judy catches up to Nick saying, you're under arrest, and he says, well, I have a permit, I have this and that. And then there's this exchange between Nick and Judy in which Nick is basically, he's being really mean, but he's unfortunately being realistic, because it's kind of that hearty dose of reality that Judy has maybe been in denial about, because she's so optimistic and such a dreamer and believing in herself and believing that anyone could be anything, that's the whole point of Zootopia. But then here's Nick coming along with this reality check where he says, everyone comes to Zootopia thinking they can be anything they want. Well, you can't. You can only be what you are. Sly fox, dumb bunny. And Judy doesn't back down. She says, I am not a dumb bunny. And Nick just says, right. And that's not wet cement. You'll never be a real cop. You're a cute meter maid, though. Hang in there. Maybe a supervisor one day. So he's really condescending, and he's really being a jerk, but he is speaking some semblance of truth, that not everything can be as she wants it to be, where everyone just gets along. And so everything that Nick says, it hits her hard. And then when she gets home from her first day as a cop, she is depressed, and she turns on the radio, and it's all sad songs, of course. And then when her parents call, they see that she's a meter maid and thinking, oh, she's not a real cop. And she's feeling not as cheerful and joyful as she had started. And then her neighbors are saying, leave her alone. She feels like a failure. And she's just telling herself, tomorrow is another day. And they could hear her, because they could just hear her. And she says, yeah, but it might be worse. That's so bad. She has to just keep looking up, though. And so then when she is again on parking duty, then it turns out that a pig comes up to her saying, are you going to help me? And then it turns out that a store was robbed. So she goes and chases down this weasel that has stolen from the store. And there's one part where there are these shrews coming out of a Mousie's instead of Macy's. And at the end, after this whole chase sequence, when she catches the weasel in this donut thing, and she says, I popped the weasel. But then Chief Bogo is being hard on her. And I love this line because it's self-aware, and I'm such a big fan of self-aware meta humor, where he says, life isn't some cartoon musical where you sing a little song and your insipid dreams come true, so let it go. That's great. As in, let it go from Frozen. And then this otter named Mrs. Otterton, she comes in asking about her husband, Emmett Otterton, that he'd been missing for 10 days. It's not like him to up and disappear because he's a florist. He has a family. And Judy says that she'll find him. But then Chief Bogo, he says he's going to fire her for insubordination. But then he gives her a chance. He says, if you can't find him within 48 hours, you strike out and you have to resign. And so she takes on the challenge. And so she's given the case file, and it's just no information. But then she looks at the photo and she sees a popsicle similar to the one that Nick and his partner Fennec had been selling to other animals. And then she says, a popsicle, and Clawhauser says the murder weapon. Clawhauser is funny. And then he's saying, what is that? I don't know what that means. And Judy says, it means I have a lead. And she sees a picture, in the picture, Nick's tail. So she goes to Nick again. And he's not fazed by her until she brings down the foot of authority, so to speak. And she says, you're under arrest for felony tax evasion, because he does all that hustling. And that's when he really first starts to take her seriously. And then he's saying, well, it's my word against yours. And then she says, actually, it's your word against yours. And she plays a recording of him admitting all that. She has this pen, this carrot-shaped pen that also is a recorder. So she has evidence against him. And earlier when he had said it's called a hustle, sweetheart, then she turns it around on him. So she says, it's your word against yours, and if you want this pen, you're going to help me find this poor missing otter, or the only place you're going to be selling popsicles is the prison cafeteria. It's called the hustle, sweetheart. I love her delivery. It's perfect. And then the Fennec guy, he's laughing. He's like, oh, you're going to need this, and have fun working with the fuzz. He gets a fake badge. So then they talk to this yak character, and they're all naked, the animals. They're all natural. And then they have to go to the DMV. So the DMV part, that's the only thing I had seen of this movie, because that was in all the promos for it, all the commercials. And I get the joke that time stands still at the DMV. So they have sloths running the DMV, so they're slow animals, of course. So it's a clever joke, but I mean, I get the point, but the scene does kind of drag on. I understand that's the point, but it just drags on a little bit too much, where the joke kind of gets run into the ground. But they need to run a license plate. And then it's funny, though, when they finally get the license plate number, and then Judy walks out saying, hurry, we gotta beat the rush hour. It's night! Like, it's nighttime. They wasted a whole day, and she's angry at Nick because she only has 48 hours to solve this case. But then they find out that the license belongs to a limo service in Tundra Town. And so Nick doesn't care at all, really, about solving this case. He's only being dragged along because he wants to get that pen back from Judy so that he doesn't get arrested. And he's just going along with it because he has to. And he's still just giving her flack. And he says, well, they should have gotten a real cop to find him, as in Otterton. And she says, does seeing me fail somehow make you feel better about your sad, miserable life? And he says, it does. It 100% does. He's got that great sarcasm delivery. The voice acting, by the way, I didn't mention any actors. Jennifer Goodwin plays Judy, and Jason Bateman plays Nick. And I'm always... because with movies, they record separately almost 100% of the time. And it's so interesting to me because it seems so natural the way they bounce off each other back and forth, the actors. But I mean, obviously they recorded it separately, but it works well. And so Judy throws the pen over the fence, and Nick just climbs over it. And then she says, the thing is, and then she says, having already made it under the fence because she dug underneath it, and she says to him, you don't need a warrant if you have a probable cause, and I'm pretty sure I just saw a shifty lowlife climbing the fence, so you're helping plenty, come on. And, okay, full disclosure, it was right around this point in the movie where I thought to myself, oh no, I think I'm starting to ship these two, I swear, because before that, that didn't even cross my mind. I was just invested in the story unfolding, but then I thought to myself, oh, they've got good back and forth, and she's outsmarting him, and he is slowly but surely respecting her, so then I thought, oh no, I ship these two. That's it. So, yep, I will admit that. I definitely ship Nick and Judy. So, they look through the limo, and there's a funny line where Nick says, who still uses CDs? And then they see that the back seat is all scratched up with claw marks. And then he realizes that this limo belongs to someone named Mr. Big. And we see these polar bear henchmen that grab them and take them to Mr. Big. And it turns out that Mr. Big is a shrew, this little tiny shrew. And this is all just a full-on parody of The Godfather. So he's saying stuff relevant to The Godfather. You come here unannounced on the day my daughter is to be married. And he kisses his ring. Nick kisses his ring like in The Godfather. Mr. Big, by the way, is voiced by Maurice LaMarche. I've mentioned him before. He's the voice of the Brain from Pinky and the Brain. He voices a lot of characters. So he's going to ice them, but then it turns out that Mr. Big's daughter is the shrew that Judy had saved earlier when she was going after the weasel robber. So then Mr. Big decides to help them, and he tells them to talk to the driver, Monches, who is a jaguar that lives in the rainforest district. And so Mr. Monches says how Mr. Otterton kept yelling about the night howlers, and Nick says, oh, right, the night howlers, like he's playing along, and then Judy just gets the hint and plays along with that too. And she says, oh, clever fox. And then when she asks him to open the door, and then when he goes to open the door, all of a sudden he is feral, Monches, and he's going to attack them. And so there's another chase sequence where they're running for their lives. And when Nick is talking to the now feral Monches, I love this line delivery for some reason, where he says, now I can tell you're a little tense, so I'm just going to give you a little personal space, and he just runs off. I just thought that was great. And then the one part where he's saying, Rabbit, whatever you do, don't let go. And she says, I'm going to let go. No, you're what? And then they go falling, but then they land in the branches. And then Nick says, Carrots, you saved... Oh, he calls her Carrots, which I think is adorable. He says, Carrots, you saved my life. And she says, well, that's what we do in the ZPD. And they end up wrapped up in the branches, and then the backup shows up for them. And Bogo is disappointed in her, and he asks her for her badge. But then Nick stands up for her, and he says, no, she will not be giving you that badge. You gave her a clown vest and 2 days to crack a case you haven't been able to solve, and that they still have 10 hours. So then after they leave, Judy thanks him, and he says, never let them see that they get to you. And Judy says, so things do get to you. And Nick says, I mean, not anymore, but I was small and emotionally unbalanced like you once. And she says, har, har. And he says, no, it's true. His sarcasm, I just love it. But this is the point where Nick is vulnerable and he opens up to Judy. And he tells her a story about how when he was younger, he wanted to join the Ranger Scouts. That he was the only predator in the Scouts, but then all the other animals turn on him, saying, if you think we would let a fox in, you're crazy, and they put a muzzle on him. And it's so devastating, because he's this bright-eyed little fox wanting to prove himself, and then it's just so sad. So then, by the way, on a side note, young Nick is voiced by Kath Soucie, an amazing voice actress. You may know her as Phil and Lil and Betty from Rugrats. So many characters, I can't even begin to list them all. Miriam from Hey Arnold. She's also Lola Bunny in Space Jam. Anyway, so at the end of that story, Nick says that if the world is only going to see a fox as shifty and untrustworthy, there's no point in trying to be anything more than that. And Judy says, thank you for telling me, and she's trying to make him feel better, but then all of a sudden he gets an idea saying, wait, the traffic cams, and he realized that they could look at the traffic cams to help them out. And so they go to the assistant mayor. She's assistant to Mayor Lionheart, who is a lion, of course, and then the assistant mayor is Bellwether, who's a sheep. And there's one funny part where she's like, he did give me this mug, and it says world's greatest dad, and dad is crossed out and says world's greatest assistant mayor. Terrible. And then after she leaves, then Nick just says, you'd think when she goes to sleep she counts herself because she's a sheep. Just the silly little animal humor. And they see timber wolves, so they think, oh, that's the night howlers. And then Nick says, if I wanted to avoid surveillance because I was doing something illegal, which I never have, I would use the maintenance tunnel. So that's what they go to. And then Judy says, look at you, junior detective. I think you'd actually make a pretty good cop. And he says, how dare you? So they head out of town to where the wolves are. And then Judy howls. And then the other wolves start howling. And then Nick just says, you are a clever bunny. And so they go into the old abandoned building that turns out to be a hospital. And that's where they see that all the missing mammals, all 14 of them, they are in this hospital. And they are all caged because they're feral. So Judy is trying to figure out how they became feral. And she films the mayor. And then they have to escape because they get caught because her phone rings. It's her parents calling. And then they go down the toilet and then they end up in the water, and then Nick is screaming, carrots, hops, Judy. He finally says Judy. And then I like that for some reason when characters always refer to the character as a certain name and they finally refer to them as their first name. I think that's clever because it's like they of course know their name, but it's just they purposely call them a nickname. I think it's adorable. And then Clawhauser goes to tell the chief that Judy cracked the case, that she found all 14 missing mammals. And when he walks in, Chief Bogo is watching this app where there's an app where they put a picture of their face dancing with Gazelle. And Clawhauser had been using the app earlier, and then when he sees Bogo using it, he's saying, oh, you use that Gazelle app? And then it's just funny. And then when he tells her about Judy, and then it's just the app saying, wow, I'm impressed. Like, it's, of course, Chief Bogo thinking that, but it's just the app saying it's great. And then Judy has to give a press conference, and she's saying she's nervous, so Nick gives her advice. He says, okay, press conference 101. You want to look smart, answer their question with your own question, and then answer that question. And then he says, Officer Hops, could you tell us more about this case? Was this a tough case? Yes, it was. And then she says that he should be up there with her and that they did this together. And then he says, well, am I a cop? No, I am not. And then she says, I've been thinking it would be nice to have a partner. And she gives him a job application to enroll in the ZPD. And then she gives him the carrot pen saying, if you need something to write with. And it's a nice moment, but then unfortunately it all takes a turn when she gives the press conference, and then she's saying all 14 mammals who were missing and had gone feral, they were all predators, and that she says it may have something to do with biology, something in their DNA that's making them revert back to their primitive savage ways. And then Nick is hurt by that, and he's saying, are you afraid of me? Do you think I might go nuts or try to eat you? And he mentions the fox repellent that she happens to have been carrying on her, and he's saying, oh, I don't think I didn't notice that item when we first met. And then he says, just when I thought somebody actually believed in me. And so then everything shifts in Zootopia, where it is prey living in fear of predators. And so it's such a brilliant way to talk about stereotypes and profiling and prejudices. And in the movie Gazelle, she's talking about Zootopia, and she says, it is irresponsible to label all predators as savages. We cannot let fear divide us. Please give me back the Zootopia I love. And so now the prey animals are living in fear of the predators, and the predators are feeling that that's all they see them as these dangerous animals. And then even poor Clawhauser, he has to move from the front desk, and he says, they thought it would be better if a predator such as myself wasn't the first face that you see when you walk into the ZPD. because they're just being judged by being a predator now. And that's what I mean about this movie. It's so clever. And then now Bellwether becomes the mayor, since the former mayor, Mayor Lionheart, was fired. And she's talking about how 90% of their population is prey, and that everyone's scared, but they want to make Judy the face of the ZPD. And Judy doesn't accept, and she says, I'm not a hero. I came here to make the world a better place, but I think I broke it. Such a heavy, heavy moment. And then Chief Bogo says, don't give yourself so much credit, Hops. The world has always been broken. That's why we need good cops like you. And Judy says, I came here to help the city, not tear it apart. I don't deserve to wear this badge. Thank you for the opportunity. And she leaves and she goes back home to Bunnyborough. And then at this part, it's nice because she finds out that her old childhood bully, he's grown up and bettered himself, and that her parents are actually working with him now. They run a carrot farm and they sell produce, and that he is their partner and he gives them pastries to sell and pies and everything. And she says, oh wow, that's really cool, guys. And they tell her parents, that they never would have done it if she hadn't opened their minds. And that's the first glimmer of hope for her again to make things right. And Gideon apologizes to her, saying, I had a lot of self-doubt and it manifested itself in unchecked rage and aggression. So he did his soul-searching and he realized what a jerk he was when they were kids. And then when he talks about night howlers, and she's saying night howlers, she had thought they were the wolves, but actually he was referring to these flowers. And then they say, oh yeah, your uncle ate them, and then he turned feral and bit her mom or whatever. And then she's saying a bunny can go savage, because before she was just saying that only predators can. And so then she runs off to go to Dick to find him and apologize because she needs his help, and she feels terrible for all the things she had said to him, making him feel like all she sees him as is a predator. And then first he's just cold towards her because he's hurt, and she says, I have to fix this, but I can't do it without you. And after we're done, you can hate me and that will be fine, because I was a horrible friend and I hurt you, and you can walk away knowing that you were right all along. I really am just a dumb bunny. And that last part, he plays it for her on the recorder pen, and then he says, don't worry, Carrots, I'll let you erase it in 48 hours. So then they go to that weasel guy, Duke, the guy she had arrested earlier, and it turns out he is a bootlegger. Another clever joke where he's saying, oh, I got movies, and it's other Disney CGI movies. They're all parodies. He's got instead of Big Hero 6, Pig Hero 6, Wrangled instead of Tangled, Wreck-It Rhino instead of Wreck-It Ralph, and he says even movies that haven't been released yet. And you got Moana, which has since been released, Graphic, I'm not sure what that's supposed to be honest, and Floatsin 2 instead of Frozen 2. And then they go to Mr. Big because they're going to have him ice Duke if he doesn't help them. And he says Judy is the godmother to his future granddaughter. And his daughter says, I'm going to name her Judy. It's so cute. And then he says, okay, fine, you have to go to a ram named Doug. He's the opposite of friendly. He's unfriendly. And this ram works at this underground place where he's harvesting the night howlers to make this serum that makes the predators go feral. And this looks straight out of Breaking Bad. And they even have a line where he says, Walter and Jesse are back, so I'm leaving now, when they come to give him coffee and then they knock him out so they can go in. And so there you go, some Breaking Bad references. And then Judy and Nick go in, they take a case for evidence with the serum, and then Judy's saying, no, we need to take all of it. So then she's using this old trolley car to take them to the ZPD, and Nick says it would take a miracle to get this rust bucket going, and then she gets it going, and he says, well, hallelujah. And then another action sequence where they're speeding towards another train. She tells them to speed up, and then they do, and then everything ends up exploding, and then she's saying, oh no, all the evidence is gone. And he's saying, well, good thing I saved this, and he has the one case. So then they cut into the Natural History Museum, and Mayor Bellwether is there, the sheep, and she's saying, oh, great, I'll take that, the evidence. And then Judy gets confused, knowing something is off, saying, how did you know where to find us? So then it turns out that the classic villain reveal, that Mayor Bellwether is the villain. She is the one behind this whole plot to make the predators go feral so that Zootopia would become fearful of predators again, so that she could rise to power, that things would be divided. And she's trying to make Judy side with her, saying, we're the little guys, we have to stick together, we're underestimated, underappreciated, but we outnumber the predators 10-1 so that they can partner up. But then Judy says, what are you going to do, kill me? And Bellwether says, no, he is, and she shoots Nick with the serum. And then Judy's terrified, saying, no, Nick, fight it, but he's going feral. And then Judy sings, so that's it, Prey fears predator and you stay in power. And Bellwether says, fear always works, and I'll dart every predator in Zootopia to keep it that way. So then Nick is slowly attacking Judy, and then he bites her neck, and she screams, and then all of a sudden she says, blood, 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 and death. A reference to the beginning of the movie. So then Nick's saying, all right, you're milking it. Besides, I think we got it. So it turns out that there wasn't serum in the weapon that she had shot him with. That actually there were blueberries in there from her parents' farm. And then Bellwether says, I framed Lionheart, I could frame you. It's my word against yours. And then Judy says, actually, it's your word against yours. And she holds up the pen again, and the classic line once more, it's called a hustle, sweetheart. Boo. She runs, and then Bellwether runs, and she gets arrested. So I love with that line, it's called hustle, sweetheart. The first Nick says it, all condescending, and then Judy turns it around on him, and then finally Judy says it again, but it's now Nick and Judy outsmarting Bellwether. So then Bellwether is arrested. The Night Howler antidote is put into place. So then Emmett is finally reunited with his wife. And then Judy gives a speech. When I was a kid, I thought Zootopia was the perfect place where everyone got along and anyone could be anything. Turns out, real life is a little bit more complicated than a slogan on a bumper sticker. Real life is messy. We all have limitations. We all make mistakes. Which means, hey, glass half full, we all have a lot in common. And the more we try to understand one another, the more exceptional each of us will be. But we have to try. So no matter what type of animal you are, from the biggest elephant to our first fox, I implore you, try. Try to make the world a better place. Look inside yourself and recognize that change starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with all of us. So what an incredible speech. And it turns out she's giving that speech at the ZPD Academy, and Nick becomes the latest member of the Zootopia Police Department. And the line especially that I love in that entire speech is, the more we try to understand one another, the more exceptional each of us will be. Again, important for all of us to hear. That we are all more alike than we are different. That it's important to put prejudices aside and to not go by stereotypes, to not live in fear, to accept one another, to bring each other up, not tear each other down, not be divided, but be accepting and compassionate and helpful and bringing out the best in one another. So what a brilliant message. And then in the last few scenes of the movie, Chief Bogo first says that they're on parking duty for Judy and Nick. And then he says, oh, just kidding, there's a street racer tearing it up in Havana Central. Go find him. And then Judy's driving the patrol car and Nick says, so are all rabbits bad drivers or is it just you? And she steps down on the brakes and he slams into the windshield. She says, sorry. And he's got the popsicle stuck to his face. And he says, Sly Bunny. And she says, dumb fox. And he says, you know you love me. And she says, do I know that? Yes, I do. And again, I like that it's just a friendship between them, that this movie isn't about that, the romance or anything. But my shipper heart, I can't help but ship them. But that said, it works that they're just friends. It works that they love each other as friends, that they form this nice partnership, that they make a great team together. They both work well together. But I just can't help it. Just the way he's basically flirting with her. I just think it's adorable. Him saying, you know you love me. She says, yes, I do. Even though it's not meant to be romantic. I just can't help it. I think it's so adorable that I'm like, oh, that'd be so cute. If they ever do a sequel, maybe. You never know. I can't help it. I just think it's adorable. So then, anyway, to finish out the film, it turns out that the speed racer is the sloth. I didn't mention his name. His name is Flash. And then Nick says, Flash, 100-yard dash. And then the sloth slowly smiles, saying, Nick. And then it cuts to the credits. And I like the credits scene, too, where they're at the Gazelle concert and all the characters dancing. And then it's so cute when Judy's dancing and then Nick is just kind of standing there tolerating this, but then when she bumps into him, then he looks at her and he starts dancing too, like, okay, I'll dance too. And it's just very adorable. So, excellent movie with an extremely powerful, relevant message. And I love how all the little details fall into place so well for the resolution. And though this is Judy's story, Nick really goes through the biggest change because he goes from being a hustler to being a ZPD officer. And now I do have a Zootopia story to share. I had written this right after watching the movie pretty much, and I wrote it in one sitting, which, as I had mentioned, I almost never do. Usually it takes me a while to write a short story. It takes me a long time to write. But this one I wrote in one sitting, and it's called Just One Date. So, here we go. Without further ado, it's story time. Peter's Party Supplies. We put the pep in parties. Judy Hops's violet eyes were transfixed on the business card, clutched a little too tightly in her paw, when Nick's smooth voice seeped into her ears. 2 sugars, light on the cream, all yours, he said as he slid into the passenger seat of their patrol car, presenting her with a steaming paper cup of her usual coffee. His gleaming green gaze caught sight of the small card in her paw before she could tuck it away, and in one fluid motion he slid her coffee into the cup holder and plucked the card from her grasp with the ease of picking up a feather. What have you got there, Carrots? His easy, laid-back grin, while ordinarily soothing, only kicked Judy's nerves into high gear as she'd all but jumped out of her own fur. She lunged towards him, extending her paw as far as it could go, while Nick, one step ahead of her, held the card out of her reach, his wide grin never wavering. Peter's Party Supplies, he read. He gave his panicked partner a sideways glance and, as if taking pity upon seeing her look so genuinely distraught, he handed her back the card. Let me guess, your folks are packing in their carrot farm, so you're planning on throwing them a retirement party? If that's the case, tell them to send me the rest of the blueberries. Don't worry, I'll pay for every last one. As Nick spoke, Judy slipped the card back into her vest and lifted the coffee cup to her mouth, welcoming the taste of the perfectly brewed beverage made just the way she liked it. As she swallowed, she realized Nick had grown silent and was simply staring at her now, patiently waiting for her response as he took a sip of his own coffee. She tightened her grip around the hot cup. "Actually, it's nothing like that," she said, purposely avoiding his gaze now as she returned the coffee to the cup holder and put the car in drive. "You see, I met this... and he..." My, Officer Hops, you really do know how to keep a guy on the edge of his seat," Nick said as he tucked his arm against the back of his head and took another leisurely sip. Stopping at a red light, Judy released a sigh, at last gathering her nerves as well as enough courage to tell him the truth. "I met this bunny named Peter while I was making a quick run at the grocery store the other day, and he gave me his card after he asked me out." She chanced a quick glance at Nick, whose arm slipped to his side as he straightened up, his body stiff. A mere second later, the light turned green, and Judy looked away from him and pressed down on the gas pedal once more. "A bunny named Peter, huh?" he said, and there was something terse in his voice, a sizable bite of sarcasm as he followed it up with, "Is his last name Cottontail?" "No, as a matter of fact, it isn't," Judy said almost angrily, as the regret she felt for actually telling him the truth was instantaneous. She waved her paw dismissively. "It doesn't matter anyway. I'm not going to go out with him." Now, Nick said as if to calm her. "Obviously this Peter Rabbit guy can't be all bad, otherwise you wouldn't have accepted his fun little business card. And while we're on the subject, may I point out that his slogan, 'We put the pep in parties,' doesn't make any sense. He should have said, 'We put the art in parties.' Or pies." "Are you done?" Judy asked. "Are you going to call him?" Nick countered. "No, okay, I'm not," Judy said, her patience running thin. She tightened her hold on the steering wheel as she rambled on. "And it's not because he doesn't seem like a perfectly nice bunny with a good job and a lovely coat of dark gray fur." "Really?" Nick said dryly, yet with the slightest tinge of amusement. "Then why not, dear Judith?" "Because, Nicholas," Judy snapped back, "I'm an officer of the law first and foremost." She paused, composing herself, before she continued. "My purpose in life is to serve and protect, which means I don't have time for all those mushy things like dating or holding paws or cuddling or whispering sweet nothings into your beloved's ear after he serenades you from a balcony," Nick said with his ever-mischievous smirk spread across his face. He leaned back against the seat once more. "Come on, Hops. Obviously you're amazing at what you do, and you're fortunate to get to live out your passion and make the world a better place. But you gotta take care of your needs, too. You're telling me you've never even once envisioned yourself being wooed by some handsome Prince Charming who worships the ground you walk on, eventually marrying him in some lavish ceremony and riding off towards the sunset together?" Judy blinked. "You've read too many fairy tales. My point is," Nick said, "one little date won't kill you. I think you should call him." Approaching a stop sign, Judy eased up on the gas pedal and pressed on the brake, bringing the car to a halt. The sound of the running engine filled the silence as she looked at Nick, who looked back at her with that confident, half-lidded gaze of his. In that moment, a strange feeling hit her. It was heavy, bordering on gloomy, disappointment. "You do?" she heard herself ask, unexpectedly quiet, unable to shake the feeling. If anything, it only deepened when he gave her a nod. She turned her eyes back to the road and proceeded down the street, still struggling to pinpoint the source of this feeling. With her eyes cast towards the city's skyline, she said as if to herself, "In that case, I think I will." Having torn through her entire closet in her new, much larger apartment, Judy came to the conclusion that her wardrobe was in desperate need of an upgrade as well. She ultimately settled on her favorite pink blouse and a pair of black slacks. Now, staring at her reflection in her bathroom mirror, Judy brought her attention to her ears. Should she leave them up or down? There were too many little decisions to make, and she was overthinking every single one. It didn't help that Nick had made himself comfortable in her armchair a half-hour prior, all lackadaisical and relaxed as he perused the latest issue of Mammals magazine. His ears only perked up when he heard the door open, and Judy stepped out, her shoulders back and her chin up. "How do I look?" she asked. Nick's eyes looked her up and down in a quick sweep, and the corners of his mouth ticked up as he released a soft chuckle and dropped his gaze back to the magazine. Like you haven't a clue what you're doing. Judy's jaw dropped for a second, and another second later she stomped up to him, paws on her waist. Nick raised the magazine, flipping it to the next page. She folded her arms. "What was that, partner?" she asked in a low voice, fury simmering beneath the surface. Nick, calm as ever, met her heated gaze. She narrowed her eyes while he rolled his. He closed the magazine and tossed it on the chair as he got up. "All right, look," he said, holding up his paws as if to level with her. "You're new at this, so I'll give you a few quick pointers. First off, don't be nervous. This guy clearly already likes you, so if anyone's going to be nervous, it'll be him, trying to impress you by making witty remarks in an embarrassing attempt to show you how funny and charismatic he is." Her initial skepticism deflating, Judy relaxed her stance and willed herself to listen to Nick's advice. After all, he was right. She was new at this. Putting her own life on the line to protect the city against crime, she could do that with her eyes closed, but dating, she was terrified. Any advice was more than welcome, and Nick seemed to have it in spades. Second, he went on, that be yourself nonsense that everyone's always prattling on about, it's true to a certain extent when you're on a date. However, you want to take a keen interest and really get to know the guy. Find out what you two have in common. Ask him questions, like where'd you grow up, what do you like to do for fun, how many kids do you want, light stuff. Judy furrowed her brow. Asking somebody how many kids they want is light? Just making sure you're paying attention, Nick said, and he brought his paw to her shoulder. Now, there's one last important detail you should know. It's not uncommon for a date to end with a bit of physical affection, as it were, in the form of a hug or, I don't know, perhaps a kiss. Judy drew in a sharp breath, her eyes widening. A kiss? Was she even ready for that? She just met the guy. Take it easy there, Twitchy, Nick said as if he could read her thoughts. Not everyone likes to kiss on the first date, but the way I see it, if it feels right and you're ready, just go for it. You may be pleasantly surprised. Judy swallowed now, her usual confidence chipping away the longer Nick gazed at her with that knowing glint in his eyes. Her voice was small, almost trembling as she asked, How do you know if it's right?" "Well," Nick said, his smile widening, warm and dazzling, causing every single one of her hairs to stand up. "If he's a gentleman, he'll probably insist on walking you to your door. You'll agree because you're polite, even though you're more than capable of walking yourself to your door. Heck, you should be walking him to his door." Judy let out a small giggle at that. "So when the two of you reach your door," Nick continued, "you'll both stop and turn to each other. He'll look you in the eyes and tell you what a great time he had, how lucky he was to be in the company of such a smart, kind-hearted bunny with beautiful purple eyes." Something seemed to catch in his throat then, and he cleared it forcefully. "Or, something like cheesy like that," he said in haste, before returning to the scenario he was building. Then you'd thank him for a wonderful date, and he'd tell you how much he was already looking forward to seeing you again. He'd say goodnight, as would you. Your gazes would linger, and he'd start inching closer to you, like this. And he did, lowering his head towards her. You'd feel your heart start to race as you'd slowly shut your eyes. And she did, her heartbeat soaring. And then he'd... A loud knock on the door had them both jumping back, their faces mirrored with wide-eyed expressions as they each struggled to breathe properly. "He's here," Judy said. "Eager fellow," Nick said. He took a moment to clear his throat again as he fumbled with his paws like he didn't know what to do with them, when finally he stuffed them in his pockets and walked past her, heading for the adjacent room. "Well, better not keep the poor guy waiting. I'll stick around for a few more minutes and then slip out after you two leave. You kids have fun." "Nick," she said uselessly, as he'd already disappeared. Judy stirred the steamed carrots on her plate with her fork, not bothering to actually eat them. Her date, Peter, sat across from her. She only half listened as he droned on and on about his job. "Everyone assumes that owning a party supply store is all fun and games, when in fact being a successful business owner requires a lot of hard work," he said, high-strung, as he bit into a piece of papaya and chewed noisily. I can't even begin to tell you how stressful it is when someone comes into my store demanding a specific color of streamers, even after I've explained to them that I don't carry their precious coral pink or mint green, and that their bratty kid would just have to settle for a standard red or blue. I mean, really, some animals can be so utterly obtuse. Judy's nose wrinkled. Well, this bunny certainly wasn't as pleasant as he seemed when she'd met him. Then again, they'd only spoken for a few minutes. Here he was now, yammering on for a solid 20 minutes. He had yet to even ask her what she did for a living. "So, Peter," she said, getting a word in edgewise when he'd paused to take a drink of water, "what do you like to do for fun?" "I mostly enjoy staying in, reading a book, sometimes watching a good documentary," he said, shoveling another spoonful of food into his mouth. "I'm a bit of a loner." "And where did you grow up?" Judy asked. "Here in Zootopia," Peter said through his mouth full before swallowing. "Although I do have a few hundred cousins who live in Bunnyborough. Bunch of simple-minded rabbits they are. I visited there once. It was awful. Just an awful place." Judy scrunched her eyebrows together. "I see. And pardon me if this may seem too personal a question, but how many kids do you want?" "Oh, I hate kids," Peter said. "I'd rather my tail be chopped off than have to deal with a bunch of screaming, whiny little kids." He'd raised the water glass to his mouth again, while Judy stared blankly, drumming her paws against the table. "What's your opinion on foxes?" she asked. "Vicious predators," Peter said without missing a beat, setting the glass down. "I detest them more than I detest children, and I detest children a lot." He returned to finishing his meal, but at that point Judy had heard all she needed to hear. Crumpling up her napkin, she tossed it over her plate, grabbed her bag, and fished out a few bills, slapping them onto the table as she stood. "This has been an eye-opening experience for me," she said, "and for that I thank you. Best of luck with everything, Peter." "Wait, you're leaving?" he asked. "What did I do wrong?" Judy was already heading for the exit, though she paused and turned back to say, "I'll give you a quick tip. Next time, try asking your date something, anything, instead of just talking about yourself the whole time." With that, she spun forward and pushed open the door, heading into the night, knowing exactly where she wanted to be. The look on Nick's face when he'd opened the door to see Judy standing on his doorstep was one she'd never forget. To say he was surprised was an understatement. "Carrots," he said, as if he was imagining her. "What are you—" She cut him off by jumping up, looping her arms around the back of his neck and pulling him down into a hearty kiss. He reacted instantly, drawing his paws around her waist like they belonged there. Her heart thumped faster than her feet could ever move. And when they broke away, all she could do was beam an open-mouthed grin as she tried to calm her quickened breathing. "Wow," he said, and she only laughed. "I take it your dates didn't go so well." "There was no spark," Judy said, still holding on to him like she never wanted to let go. Nick held on too. "Oh, you've got to have a spark." "He also hates kids," Judy said. "Interesting," Nick said, his usual stealthy grin returning. "You decided to ask him about that on the first date? That's bold, Hops." "Takes one to know one, Wild." He chuckled warmly, and there was never a sound she loved hearing more. When he quieted, their gazes stayed locked. Slowly they both leaned in, and their eyes drifted shut as their lips met again. She could feel his heart pounding just as hard as hers, and she wondered if he'd been wanting to kiss her for a while. "Perhaps," he said, his deep voice vibrating against her as he broke the kiss, "you could tell me more about this horrible date over dinner sometime. That is, if you feel you'll have the time for it." Judy lifted a brow, eyes shining. "For you, I can make the time." As they went in for a third kiss, she decided maybe there was something to those romantic fairy tales after all. Alright, so that was just one date. And, I mean, clearly I wrote that under the impression that they both secretly liked each other, Nick and Judy, because I purposely didn't do anything with a big confession or a big realization. It was just they both liked each other. They were both just kind of waiting for the other one to make a move. Like I said, I couldn't help it. I had to ship them. They were too adorable. They just work well together. Work well as friends and as a couple. I really do think it would be clever, though, if they ever do a sequel for this movie, because then it would be like interspecies relationships, so they could do other themes like that. So there you go. That was a Short, sweet story. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, now is the time to seize the day. I'll be discussing Newsies. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.